Hi folks, hope you're okay today. I just want to make a video about presuppositional debates and debating generally, skeptics, and just to give some advice about debating skeptics or atheists. And I think this advice will be helpful. I've listened to hundreds of debates, and I absolutely love the presuppositional debaters, all of them. I love them, think they're great, etc. But I don't think we're winning the debates, uh, those who are doing presuppositional debates. It's not because the arguments aren't sound. Um, the arguments are devastating, but it's also about perception. It's about how people perceive, and a lot of people can't follow the philosophical arguments, and so presuppositions are getting undermined in debate because even though they're winning the argument, people who are watching the debates are perceiving the more practical arguments and the more emotional arguments as opposed to the more philosophical arguments of the precepts. And I think that's a big problem. Um, and also, it's not only with precepts, but it's a big problem generally when debating skeptics. And I just want to unpack what I mean by that. And then I want to give some advice generally about debating skeptics and atheists. And I think I'm qualified to do that considering I've had 5 years experience with them, in-depth experience. The first thing is that if you go and look at Dan Courtney's debates, he's an atheist. He's a very good debater. He does his research well, and if you notice how he debates, at key points in his debate there will be emotional arguments. So for example, in one debate where he talks about morality, he connects Stalin, Hitler and the Old Testament, as if the Old Testament is on par with these people, and he'll show a picture of Stalin, Hitler and the Old Testament and connect the two. Now that's a very powerful emotional argument. At the end of his debate on morality with a precept guy, he then throws all the emotional goo he can about how the Bible is violent, etc. How could God exist? How could there be a good God? How could there be a God? So by the time he's finished his, and this is typical of atheists, they make the emotional mincemeat of what you're saying. So you need to be prepared to counteract that. And the way to counteract that is to make sure that in your debate you use at least one or two arguments that are practical, that people can relate to, and that you counter their emotional arguments with some kind of practical arguments that people can get their teeth into, that can relate to. And at the end of the debate, make sure that you say something about their emotional arguments. So at the end of the debate, often atheists losing the debate in the beginning of the debate, middle of the debate, will try to bring it back by ending with some kind of emotional argument. So what you need to do is be ready for that, and at the end of the debate make sure that you say, well, you know, my opponent might end with kind of emotional argument, pictures about violence in the Old Testament, but is it based on reason? Is it based on evidence? You know, challenge that methodology that they use. Challenge it through the debate. Say, well, this is just an emotional argument. Keep saying it, and that'll stick in people's mind, and it'll counteract these kind of pictures they'll show of people being killed in the Old Testament. And you know, one debate at by a Covenant Theological Seminary graduate with an atheist, the atheist showed a picture of a slave that had been whipped on its back in the deep south, and said Do you really want to support the Bible when the Bible supports this? Now that's a powerful emotional argument. The atheists will use this quite a lot in their debates. Pictures of people being killed and then saying, look, this is in the Old Testament. Do you really support this? So you've got to put some practical argument in, and you've got to powerfully challenge that in a powerful way. And a philosophical argument doesn't cut the mustard because it's too abstract. People are trying to work out the abstract, but when they see a picture, when they see something emotional, that grabs their attention. So the way to counteract it is call it out, keep calling it out, saying it's emotional, but also make sure that you do some practical arguments that people can relate to. Use illustrations. One presuppositional guy debating Dan Courtney used an illustration of chocolate and showed how evolution is amoral, and trying to get morality from an amoral system is just both saying it's amoral. And so he's saying chocolate, no matter how many different varieties it's made into, it's still chocolate. And he used a big picture of chocolate, and it was a good illustration. And you need to use a few illustrations or a few examples that people can grab hold of that's not abstract in your argument. So that's just a general thing. And whenever you're debating atheists in an academic debate, always remember that they always, most of the time, will bring out of their armory these emotional arguments, because they're powerful and people can relate to them, so they're not going to give them up. So you need to be able to counteract. You need to think about strategies how you can undermine those arguments. Okay? And I don't think, as Christian apologists, a lot of work has been done on that. It's not dealt with in an effective manner to counteract that in a debate. So that's just one point. The second point is that a lot of debaters, when debating skeptics or atheists, will use often one argument. So I've seen debaters use one argument on the existence of God, or one argument in presuppositionalism. That's very unwise, because if your opponent picks apart that one argument, you're dead. And what happens anyway, even if they can't pick apart your argument, they will bring 3 or 4 arguments up, and some of those arguments will stick. So I would say you need at least 3, maybe 4 good arguments in a debate, and it makes it harder for your opponent to take you apart. And those 4 arguments need to be varied. Have one scientific, one historical, one philosophical. But if you have all philosophical argument, people are going to be bogged down with philosophy and they won't be able to relate to it. So you need variety. You need a scientific one, historical one, philosophical one. Keep it varied. Make sure there's practical arguments there. Make sure that you use a bit of science, a bit of philosophy, a bit of history, etc. Use all the variety of evidences and tools at your disposal, but have about 4 arguments. That will make it exceedingly difficult for your opponent to pick you apart, because by the time he's done 2, he ain't got time for 3, and he definitely ain't got time for 4. Yeah? So it's important you use about 4 arguments. If he does the same, that's okay, or if she does the same, don't worry about it. You should know what their arguments are going to be and should be able to take them apart. But you need about 4 arguments. To go into a debate with just one argument is not wise, because even if you hold the ground on that one argument, the number of arguments that they'll bring in the debate, some of those arguments are going to stick, and then it will outbalance what you're saying. The other thing as well, basically in a debate, in an academic debate, you need to do 2 things. You need to make sure that your 4 arguments that you have, you hold to solid ground. that you know those arguments backwards and forwards, that you need to stand on solid ground. Once you've got solid ground, you need to know why it's solid, and you need to know how they'll try and knock you off that ground, and you need to be able to defend it well. So stand on solid ground, solid arguments that you know will stand the test of being hammered. Throughout the debate, those arguments will be hammered, so you need to know that what you're standing on will hold ground. As you stand on solid ground and know the argument inside and out, then you need to go for the jugular. You need to go for the opponent's weakness. You need to find that weakness, and you need to keep hammering it and hammering it all through the debate. Another thing is, have a couple of key themes or key words that you keep repeating in your debate. So if you look at the debate, I think it's Bill Nye and Ken Ham. If you notice, throughout the debate, Bill Nye uses a catchphrase saying, he says, it has no your model doesn't have any value in the real world scientifically. He keeps repeating the catchphrase. Once you say it a few times and it sticks, and you've been able to provide evidence, it's a powerful way of winning the debate. You look at the best debates, there'll always be a catchphrase within that debate that sums up the opponent's position and undermines it. So for example, if I was debating Richard Carrier and he uses the Bayes theorem, my catchword in that debate would be historians don't use the Bayes theorem because they see it's not objective, it's subjective. So why are you using it? And I would keep repeating that and give evidence why, give solid evidence why is that the case. So in the debate I'd say, well, historians don't use the Bayes theorem. This historian, blah blah blah, world authority in the area of history, etc. This mathematician says the Bayes theorem is fallacious. Through the debate I'll say it again, historians don't use it, it's a very emotional, subjective methodology, and I'll show you why. Let's do the calculations. Even Christians use it, don't agree with the Christians. So through the debate I'll just keep hammering and hammering and hammering the Bayes theorem. Near the end of the debate I'll say historians don't use the Bayes theorem because it's subjective, and I've repeated it 3 or 4 times throughout the debate, giving different evidences, different slants, and that will stick powerfully in people's minds, right? So you need to do that. You also need to be aware of various strategies that debaters use. Like some debaters will start off as saying such a position as this logical fallacy, that logical fallacy, that logical fallacy, and these are all about perception. They're trying to get people to perceive your position in a certain way. If your opponent's wrong and saying you have this fallacy, that fallacy, this, it's no good just saying I don't have these fallacies, or explaining to them why you don't have these fallacies. You've got to do more than that. You've got to call them out. You've got to show them for the dishonesty of trying to say that your position has a fallacy. So you need to make a song and dance about it. Say, well, why are you doing this? You know, you're just being dishonest. It's not right. You know that this is not a fallacy. You need to bang it home and press it back. The other thing as well, in a debate, skeptics are very good at pushing on you, but skeptics are not very good at being pushed on. Push them back with tough questions in your debate. Most skeptics will scream and squirm when you give them a tough question, and they're not used to receiving tough questions. They're very good at asking questions, they're very good at putting you under the scrutiny, but they're not good when their own position is questioned. And most skeptics will crumble when you give them tough questions. They will crumble because they're not used to it. Even the best of the skeptic debaters will fudge, equivocate, scream and shout and try to get out of it when you give them tough questions. So have tough questions. Thank you for listening.